I was sitting in my tiny apartment on a Tuesday evening working on my laptop when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it made my heart skip. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. The voice on the other end made my blood run cold. It was Daniel, my brother, calling after 3 years of complete silence. His first words were shaky and desperate. "Christy, please do not hang up. Mom and Dad are—" I hung up immediately, my hands trembling. After everything he had done to me, after the lies that destroyed my life and got me disowned by my own parents, he had the nerve to call. But those unfinished words about our parents haunted me. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever had family drama, and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will want to hear how this all started 3 years ago, when my brother completely destroyed everything I had built. Growing up in suburban Ohio, Daniel and I seemed like the perfect siblings from the outside. Our father, Robert, worked as a mechanical engineer at a local manufacturing company, while our mother, Patricia, spent her days as a registered nurse at the county hospital. They had built a comfortable middle-class life for us, complete with a 2-story house, family vacations, and Sunday dinners that always smelled like Mom's famous pot roast. But beneath that picture-perfect surface, there was always an undeniable favoritism that shaped our entire childhood. Daniel, being 2 years older than me, was the golden child who could do no wrong. When he brought home mediocre grades, our parents called him creatively minded. When I brought home anything less than an A, I was not applying myself enough. Daniel received a brand new car for his 16th birthday, while I was told that I needed to earn mine through hard work and responsibility. This pattern continued throughout high school and into college. While Daniel coasted through community college on our parents' dime, frequently changing majors and eventually dropping out altogether, I worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for my education at Ohio State University. I spent my evenings waiting tables at a local diner and my weekends stocking shelves at a grocery store, all while maintaining a full academic scholarship that required a minimum 3.8 grade point average. By the time I was 25, I had just completed my Master of Business Administration degree with a specialization in entrepreneurship. I had spent months developing a business plan for a fitness tracking application that I called FitTrack Pro. The concept was simple but revolutionary for its time. Users could input their workout routines, track their progress, set goals, and connect with personal trainers through video calls. I had done extensive market research, created detailed financial projections, and even developed a working prototype with the help of a computer science friend from college. The only thing standing between me and my dream was capital. I needed $50,000 to hire a development team, purchase server space, and cover marketing costs for the first year. Traditional loans were difficult to obtain for startup ventures, and I did not have wealthy connections or family money to rely on. After weeks of sleepless nights trying to figure out financing options, I made what I thought was a brilliant decision. I would bring Daniel in as a business partner. Daniel was 27 at the time, and had been living with our parents for nearly 2 years since dropping out of college. He spent his days playing video games, occasionally helping Dad with yard work, and complaining about how difficult it was to find meaningful employment. Despite his lack of formal education, Daniel possessed an undeniable charm and natural sales ability. He could convince anyone of anything when he put his mind to it, and I thought those skills would be invaluable for marketing and investor relations. I presented the partnership proposal to Daniel on a warm spring afternoon as we sat on our parents' back porch. I explained the entire business concept, showed him the market research, and offered him an equal 50% stake in the company. His eyes lit up with an enthusiasm I had not seen from him in years. He immediately began brainstorming marketing strategies and talking about potential investors he could approach. Our parents were absolutely thrilled to see their 2 children finally working together on something productive. Within a month, we had established FitTrack Solutions as a limited liability company, with me as the primary owner and Daniel as the marketing director. I handled all the legal paperwork, business registration, and initial funding through a combination of my personal savings and a small business loan that I qualified for based on my credit score and business plan. Daniel's responsibilities included developing our marketing strategy, building relationships with potential investors, and managing our social media presence. The first 3 months of our partnership felt like a dream come true. Daniel showed up to our shared office space every morning at 8:30, sharp-dressed, professionally, and ready to work. He created compelling social media content, designed eye-catching promotional materials, and claimed to be scheduling meetings with various potential investors throughout the city. He would leave for these supposed meetings around noon each day and return with stories about promising conversations and potential funding opportunities. I was so focused on the technical development of our application that I trusted Daniel completely to handle the business development side. Our development team was making excellent progress, and we were on track to launch a beta version within 6 months. Everything seemed to be falling into place exactly as I had envisioned. But small warning signs began to appear that I initially dismissed as minor concerns. Daniel started arriving to the office later, and later sometimes not showing up until after lunch. When I asked about his schedule, he always had elaborate explanations about important breakfast meetings with potential investors or early morning networking events. He spoke confidently about various business contacts he was developing, mentioning impressive-sounding names and companies that I was not familiar with. One afternoon in our 4th month of operation, I decided to surprise Daniel with coffee and pastries from his favorite bakery downtown. I knew he had mentioned a crucial investor meeting at 2 o'clock that day, so I thought I would catch him beforehand and wish him luck. Instead of finding him at the conference room of the downtown hotel where he claimed the meeting was taking place, I spotted him at a blackjack table in the nearby Riverboat Casino. He was so focused on his cards that he did not notice me standing just 20 feet away, watching in shock as he placed what appeared to be substantial bets. When I confronted him later that evening, he had a perfectly reasonable explanation ready. The potential investor was actually the chief executive officer of a major fitness company who happened to enjoy gambling as a recreational activity. Daniel claimed they were building rapport through shared interests before discussing business opportunities. The explanation sounded plausible enough, and I wanted to believe my brother was acting in our company's best interests. The first major crack in my trust appeared when I decided to review our company's financial statements at the end of our 5th month in business. As the primary owner, I had access to all bank accounts and credit card statements, but I had been so busy with product development that I had delegated most financial monitoring to Daniel. What I discovered made my stomach drop to my feet. Our business checking account, which should have contained approximately $20,000, showed a balance of less than $3,000. More alarming were the dozens of cash withdrawals, each for amounts between $500 and $2,000, that had occurred over the past 6 weeks. The withdrawal slips all bore Daniel's signature, and many of them were processed at ATM machines located inside or near various casinos throughout the metropolitan area. When I printed out 3 months' worth of bank statements and laid them across our conference table, the pattern became undeniably clear. Daniel had been systematically draining our startup capital, taking money almost daily, and leaving our company on the brink of bankruptcy. The total amount stolen was nearly $30,000, representing more than half of our initial investment and operational funds. I confronted Daniel the next morning when he arrived at the office, placing the bank statements in front of him without saying a word. His face went pale as he realized what I had discovered, but he did not even attempt to deny the obvious evidence. Instead, he broke down crying and confessed that he had developed a serious gambling addiction over the past year. He explained that what had started as occasional entertainment at the local casino had escalated into a compulsive need that he could not control. Daniel swore on our grandmother's grave that he would get help for his addiction and find a way to repay every penny he had stolen. He begged me not to involve our parents or law enforcement, promising that he could fix this situation if I just gave him more time. Against my better judgment, I agreed to keep his gambling problems secret and work together to save our company. I still believed that my brother, despite his flaws, would ultimately do the right thing. But Daniel's promises proved to be as worthless as his previous lies about investor meetings. Over the next month, instead of getting help or finding employment to repay his debts, he became more desperate and more reckless with his theft. I discovered that he had secretly applied for and received a business credit card using our company's tax identification number and my forged signature as the primary owner. He had maxed out this credit line with cash advances totaling $15,000, all of which disappeared into various gambling establishments. Our company's total debt had now reached $65,000, far exceeding our original startup budget and pushing us into serious legal and financial trouble. I was forced to sell my car, my furniture, and even my grandmother's jewelry collection just to make minimum payments to creditors and keep our business from immediate bankruptcy. The stress was destroying my physical and mental health. I was losing weight rapidly, my hair was falling out in clumps, and I had not slept more than 3 consecutive hours in weeks. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to maintain the facade of a successful business partnership when interacting with our parents. During family dinners, he would enthusiastically describe our company's supposed progress, discussing fictional investor meetings and imaginary product development milestones. Our parents were so proud of their children's collaborative success that they had already begun telling friends and neighbors about our upcoming product launch. When I finally reached my breaking point and threatened to report Daniel's theft to the police, he made a decision that would destroy what remained of our relationship forever. Instead of confessing his crimes and seeking help for his addiction, he chose to protect himself by destroying me first. On a Thursday afternoon, while I was at the office trying to salvage what remained of our business, Daniel went to our parents' house and delivered a performance that would have won him an Academy Award. He told our parents that I had been the one stealing money from our company to support my secret drug habit. According to Daniel's fabricated story, I had become addicted to cocaine after getting involved with a dangerous boyfriend who was a known drug dealer. He claimed that I had been forging his signature on company checks and using our business accounts to funnel money to my dealer. Most convincingly, he presented our parents with copies of bank statements and withdrawal slips that showed my name and signature, conveniently omitting the fact that he had forged my authorization on most of these transactions. Daniel's masterful manipulation included crocodile tears and fearful trembling as he described how I had supposedly threatened to harm him if he ever tried to expose my criminal activities. He painted himself as an innocent victim who had been too scared to come forward, sooner claiming that I had become violent and unpredictable under the influence of drugs. To make his story more convincing, he even showed our parents text messages that he had sent to himself from my phone when I had left it unattended during a bathroom break. I had no idea that Daniel had spent the afternoon poisoning our parents' minds against me when I arrived at their house for our regular Thursday night family dinner. I walked through the front door, expecting the usual warm greeting from Mom and maybe a hug from Dad, but instead, I found them sitting stiffly in the living room with expressions I had never seen before. Daniel stood behind the couch with red-rimmed eyes and a facial expression that I would later recognize as poorly concealed guilt mixed with fear. My father, who had never spoken harshly to me in my entire life, looked me directly in the eye and said in a voice colder than winter, "Christy, we need to discuss what you have been doing to your brother." The confusion I felt must have been written all over my face because my mother immediately jumped in with her own accusation. "Do not pretend you do not know what this is about. How could you steal from your own family and threaten Daniel like that?" I genuinely had no idea what they were talking about. My first instinct was to look at Daniel for clarification, but he avoided my gaze completely and stared at the floor while shifting his weight nervously from one foot to the other. When I asked them to explain what they meant, my father pulled out a manila folder filled with bank statements, credit card bills, and printed text messages that supposedly proved my guilt in some unnamed crime. As my father read through Daniel's accusations, I felt like I was listening to a description of some other person's life. According to the evidence presented to my parents, I was a cocaine addict who had stolen over $60,000 from our business to support my drug habit. The documentation showed my signature on dozens of financial transactions that I definitely remembered Daniel handling. The text messages threatened violence against Daniel if he ever tried to expose my supposed criminal enterprise. My attempts to defend myself only seemed to make my parents more convinced of my guilt. When I explained that Daniel was the one with a gambling addiction who had been stealing money for months, they accused me of trying to deflect blame onto an innocent victim. When I pointed out that the bank statements showed withdrawals from casino ATM machines, they said I was obviously using those locations to meet with drug dealers. Every piece of evidence I presented to support my innocence was twisted into further proof of my supposed guilt. The conversation escalated quickly from accusations to shouting to ultimatums. My mother, who had always been my biggest supporter and closest confidant, told me that I was no longer welcome in their home until I admitted my crimes and sought professional help for my drug addiction. My father, fighting back tears of disappointment and anger, said the words that would haunt me for years afterward. "You are no longer our daughter, until you can prove to us that you are worthy of that title again." Daniel remained silent throughout the entire confrontation, offering no defense for me and no contradiction of the lies he had told. Even when my mother directly asked him if he was absolutely certain about his accusations, he just nodded his head and whispered, "I am sorry it came to this, but I had to protect myself." I realized in that moment that my own brother had deliberately and methodically destroyed my relationship with our parents to cover up his own crimes. My mother had already packed my belongings into garbage bags while I was being interrogated in the living room. She handed them to me at the front door and said, "When you are ready to tell us the truth and get clean, you know where to find us. Until then, you are not our child." The door slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed through my chest like a gunshot. I sat in my car in their driveway for nearly an hour, crying until I had no tears left and hoping that they would realize their mistake and invite me back inside. But the house remained dark and silent, and eventually I had to drive away with nowhere to go and no one to turn to for help. I spent that night sleeping in my car in a 24-hour diner parking lot, wondering how my life had completely fallen apart in a single evening. The 3 years that followed were the loneliest and most challenging period of my entire life. I moved to Columbus, a city large enough that I could disappear completely and start over without running into anyone from my previous life. With my savings depleted and my credit destroyed by Daniel's financial crimes, I had to accept whatever employment I could find immediately. I started working as a bartender at a sports bar near the university campus, pulling double shifts 6 days a week, just to afford rent on a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood. Those first few months were brutally difficult both emotionally and financially. I would lie awake at night missing my parents so intensely that my chest physically ached, wondering if they ever thought about me or regretted their decision to disown me. I wrote dozens of letters explaining my side of the story, but I never sent any of them because I knew Daniel's lies had poisoned them against me too thoroughly for written words to make any difference. Gradually, through sheer determination and an absolute refusal to give up, I began rebuilding my life from absolutely nothing. I enrolled in evening classes at the local community college to update my computer skills and learn new marketing techniques that would make me more employable. After 18 months of bartending, I landed a junior position at a small marketing firm that specialized in social media campaigns for local businesses. My new job introduced me to Emma, a graphic designer who became my first real friend since the destruction of my family relationships. Emma was 5 years younger than me, originally from California, and possessed an optimistic outlook on life that slowly began to rub off on me. She never pressured me to discuss my past, but she was always available to listen when I needed to talk about my loneliness or frustration. By the end of my 3rd year in Columbus, I had been promoted twice at the marketing firm and was earning enough money to move into a decent 1-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. I had built a small but reliable circle of friends through work and community activities. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own judgment again and to find strength in my independence rather than in my relationships with other people. On that Tuesday evening, when Daniel's call interrupted my peaceful routine, I was working on a freelance project for a small nonprofit organization. The irony of the timing was not lost on me. I had finally reached a place of stability and contentment in my life, and suddenly the person who had destroyed everything was trying to force his way back into my world. When my phone rang again 20 minutes later, with the same unfamiliar number, I let it go to voicemail. Daniel's recorded message was barely coherent through his sobbing, but I could make out the essential information. Our parents had been involved in a serious automobile accident earlier that day. They were both in intensive care at Ohio State Medical Center, and their condition was critical. The doctors were not sure if they would survive their injuries. I did not sleep at all that night. I kept replaying Daniel's broken voice saying, "They have been asking for you, Christy. Even after everything that happened, they want to see you before." The message had cut off at that point, leaving me to imagine the worst possible scenarios. Despite everything my parents had done to me, despite the 3 years of silence and rejection, I still loved them desperately and could not bear the thought of losing them forever. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began the 5-hour drive back to Ohio. My emotions swung wildly between anxiety about my parents' condition and anger about being manipulated by Daniel into returning home. I had no idea what I would say to any of them, or if my parents would even want to see me, given their belief that I was a drug-addicted criminal who had threatened their precious son. When I arrived at Ohio State Medical Center, I spotted Daniel immediately in the intensive care waiting room. He looked terrible, like he had not showered or changed clothes in days. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his eyes were bloodshot and swollen from crying, and his hands shook visibly as he clutched a paper coffee cup. The moment he saw me walking toward him, he jumped up and tried to embrace me, but I stepped back and held up my hand to stop him. "Do not touch me," I said, in a voice that surprised me with its steadiness. "Just tell me where they are and what happened." Daniel's face crumpled, but he led me down the hallway toward the intensive care unit while explaining the details of the accident. Our parents had been driving home from their weekly grocery shopping trip when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into the passenger side of their car. Mom had suffered severe internal injuries and was scheduled for emergency surgery the following morning. Dad had a traumatic brain injury and had not regained consciousness since the accident. As we approached the viewing window of their room, I could see my parents for the first time in 3 years. They looked so much smaller and more fragile than I remembered, connected to multiple machines and surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and hummed constantly. The sight of them in that condition broke through all my carefully constructed emotional barriers, and I had to grab the wall to keep from collapsing. That was when Daniel chose to deliver the confession that should have come 3 years earlier. Through tears and stammering words, he admitted that he had lied about everything. He told me about his gambling addiction, about stealing the money from our business, and about fabricating the entire story that turned our parents against me. He explained that he had been in therapy for the past year, trying to deal with his addiction and his guilt, but that he had been too ashamed to contact me or tell our parents the truth. "I know you will never forgive me," he whispered, "but they need surgery that costs over $200,000, and insurance will only cover half of it. I do not have any money left. I lost everything to gambling, and I cannot get approved for medical loans because of my credit. Please, Christy, I know I do not deserve to ask, but could you help them? I will do whatever it takes to make this right with you. But please do not let them die because of my mistakes." Standing in that hospital corridor looking at my unconscious parents through a window while listening to my brother beg for financial help, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. For 3 years I had dreamed about the moment when the truth would finally come out and my parents would realize how wrong they had been about me. I had imagined tearful reconciliations and heartfelt apologies that would magically heal all the damage that Daniel's lies had caused. But this was not the dramatic vindication I had fantasized about. This was just a broken family facing a medical crisis, with everyone's past mistakes and present desperation laid bare under harsh fluorescent lighting. My parents were fighting for their lives, completely unaware that their son was finally telling the truth about what had destroyed our family. Daniel was a pathetic shadow of his former confident self, destroyed by the addiction and guilt that had consumed him for years. I looked at Daniel and said, "I will help Mom and Dad because I love them, not because you are asking me to. But there are going to be conditions." I told him that when our parents recovered enough to understand what was happening, he would have to tell them the complete truth about everything he had done. He would have to explain how he had stolen money from our business, how he had lied about my supposed drug addiction, and how he had manipulated them into disowning their own daughter to protect himself. I also insisted that Daniel enter a residential treatment program for gambling addiction and commit to paying me back every penny I spent on our parents' medical expenses, even if it took him decades to do so. "This is not forgiveness," I told him clearly. "This is me choosing to be the person our parents raised me to be, despite everything you put me through. I am doing this for them, not for you." Over the next 48 hours, I coordinated with doctors' insurance representatives and hospital billing departments to arrange payment for our parents' medical care. I liquidated my savings account, took out a personal loan against my excellent credit, and even sold some of my possessions to cover the immediate expenses. Daniel sat in the waiting room the entire time, occasionally offering to help, but mostly just watching me take care of everything he should have been handling as their son. When our mother finally woke up after her surgery, weak but stable, Daniel kept his promise and confessed everything to her. I watched through the window as my mother's expression changed from confusion to shock to heartbreak, while Daniel told her about his gambling addiction and the lies he had told 3 years earlier. She cried when she realized how wrong they had been about me, and she cried even harder when she understood how much pain their rejection had caused me. My father regained consciousness the following day, and Daniel repeated his confession with the same devastating results. Dad's physical recovery would take months, but the emotional recovery from learning how he had wronged his daughter would take much longer. When I finally entered their room to speak with them directly, both of my parents were sobbing with shame and regret. "Christy, sweetheart, can you ever forgive us?" my mother whispered, reaching for my hand with fingers that still had intravenous tubes attached. "We should have known you would never do those things. We should have trusted you more than we trusted anyone else in the world." My father, still weak from his head injury, but mentally alert, squeezed my other hand and said, "I am so sorry, baby girl. We failed you as parents when you needed us most. I do not know how we can ever make this right, but please let us try." I forgave them immediately and completely because holding on to anger would have been more harmful to me than to them. I told them about my life in Columbus, about my job and my friends, and the independence I had built for myself. They were amazed and proud of my resilience, though heartbroken that I had been forced to endure so much hardship alone. We talked for hours about everything we had missed sharing over the past 3 years, and slowly began the process of rebuilding our relationship. Daniel kept his word about entering treatment for his gambling addiction. 6 months later, he had completed a residential program and found steady employment at a construction company. He was slowly paying me back for the medical expenses, sending me small amounts each month, along with letters updating me on his progress and expressing his ongoing remorse for what he had done to our family. I decided to move back to Ohio to be closer to my parents as they continued their recovery. My boss at the marketing firm helped me find a similar position with a company in Columbus, and I was able to rent a small house just 30 minutes away from my childhood home. Sunday dinners with my parents became a cherished weekly tradition again, though Daniel was only occasionally included as he worked to rebuild their trust in him. The experience taught me that forgiveness does not mean forgetting what someone did to you, and it does not mean allowing them to hurt you again. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, a way of releasing the anger and resentment that would otherwise poison your own happiness. I learned that family is not just about sharing blood or last names. Family is about the people who show up for you when everything falls apart, who love you through your mistakes, and who fight for you even when you cannot fight for yourself. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are also the people who need our help the most, but that does not mean we are obligated to sacrifice our own well-being to save them. We can choose to help from a position of strength rather than from desperation or guilt. We can set boundaries that protect us while still showing compassion to those who have wronged us. As I sat at my parents' kitchen table last Sunday, sharing a meal and conversation just like we used to do before everything went wrong, I felt a deep sense of peace that had nothing to do with forgetting the past and everything to do with choosing how to move forward. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to seek revenge, but to build a life so good that the people who tried to destroy you become irrelevant to your happiness. What would you do if someone you trusted completely betrayed you and turned your own family against you? Have you ever had to choose between holding on to anger and moving forward with your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding strength in difficult times. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is possible to rebuild your life after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to let other people's mistakes define your future.